Something's coming. Something unstoppable.
Look around you, my friend.
You will go to England as our spy.
Churchill sees Germany as a whole. He's afraid that a bomb traced to England would mean invasion or worse.
Invasion. Invasion. My country was invaded from within.
Too many signs, I can't read them. Wouldn't recognize the turn even if I seen it. Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? How we doing? It's Sunday, December 15th, about 10 till 8 p.m. here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Vocab Malone. This is a show called Street Apologist Live, where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. And today we're going to be looking at Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor whose legacy has been sort of appropriated by almost every theological disposition under the sun. And we understand that. We're going to do our best, though, to try to get in here and find out what's going on. I am glad you are here today on Street Apologist Live, and we are going to look at the PDF I've put together here, a presentation here, and I'm very interested in people coming in. And I'm going to frame it this way. I'm going to give you tonight 6 reasons why the Christian nationalists hate Dietrich Bonhoeffer. That's the way we're going to frame this tonight. 6 reasons they don't like him. First, we're going to run through his life, and then I'm going to give you the reasons. And it'll be very interesting. Theologizing subject says, insinuating Christian nationalists are Nazis is ridiculous. Well, I wouldn't say that all Christian nationalists are, although the Nazis themselves in certain instances did claim to be that, obviously. And what's interesting is there are a lot of Christian nationalists of the current stripe and variety who are friendly to the ideas of the party. And if you are familiar with the movement, you know that's true. And that's unfortunate, but let's find out what we can learn here today from the life of one German pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a fascinating man indeed, and I hope that you all will enjoy this program. It's very important and very interesting, so come on in and be sure to hit that like button. What's up, best mods in the business? Nate Dude T2 and Warrior Woman, how y'all doing? And everyone else in the live chat as well. He lived from 1906 to 1945, so right there in the beginning of the 20th century, and he saw his country, Germany, greatly changed during his life. And he saw Germany enter the Great War, as it was called at the time. And then he saw Germany also enter World War II. And this young man would become instrumental in the events of the Second World War in an unknown underground kind of way, but very important behind the scenes in the realm of the church, what's specifically called the Confessing Church. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in Breslau, Germany on February 4th, 1906. He was born into an upper middle-class family, privileged, well-educated upbringing, a very musically talented family as well. In fact, there's times where he flirted around with the idea of perhaps becoming a pianist, a musician himself, but he commented at one point that his fingers were too fat. And at the age of 13 years old, Bonhoeffer declared he was going to be a theologian. This was not looked upon real great by his family. They were not hoping for a son who would want to go into theology. But nonetheless, that's what he declared, and he stuck with that. Sam says, that's a short life when you think about it. You're exactly right, and he made a great impact in that short time. He only lived 39 years, Sam. He only lived 39 years, so you're exactly right. That is a short life indeed. Now, he attended some fantastic universities as far as a sort of elite of German society, specifically Tübingen in Berlin, and he studied under a well-known theologian and ethicist, Adolf von Harnack. Now, when you go to seminary and when you look at different systematic theologians of the 20th century. And when you look at the great names that get bandied about, you're going to hear the name von Harnack. He's frequently cited in writings. Not a household name, of course, but he is. Now, he's really more of the progressive persuasion. And in some ways, Bonhoeffer was himself, but he was not really on the same page with von Harnack. But nonetheless, von Harnack was an important influence, much like Karl Barth was. And that's a name you'll definitely hear. His shadow looms even larger over sort of Western theology, progressive circles, which is interesting because Barth himself was viewed as sort of a step away from the demythologizing of Rudolf Bultmann, who was at Tübingen. So it seems like the German Protestants just had this idea to constantly reform, but they reformed themselves right out of believing that God exists, that the gospel is meaningful, that theology has a place and the science is proper, and that scripture can be trusted in any real sense. And so you have this denial of the supernatural and an overemphasis on human autonomy and rationalism. I don't mean that we embrace as conservative evangelicals irrationality, but there's something called rationalism, which prizes human reason unaided above what has been revealed. And so Karl Barth, ironically enough, even though his own views are definitely not going to match up with the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy of 1978, his own views were seen as a positive step, actually, in what's sometimes called neo-orthodoxy. And there's a famous quote that every seminary student hears about his commentary on the Epistle to the Romans, that it was a bombshell dropped on the playground of the theologians. Well, nonetheless, you see Bonhoeffer putting these different influences sort of in dialogue with each other within his own theology, which at sometimes can be confusing. And sometimes we like what he says as people who affirm the gospel, and other times we say, what are you saying there, bro? Nonetheless, every person from every type and stripe, I do believe, should be able to respect his courage and bravery in the face of great evil. Real quick here, we see Grifter Hitchin says, was he Anabaptist? No, he was Lutheran. But what happens is, as the Lutheran Church became more and more, I'd hate to say this, but it's true, Hitlerized, you have him break away and him being part of something called the Confessing Church. Now, they weren't perfect themselves, but they were definitely better than what was going on in the mainstream. At 21, Bonhoeffer received his doctorate, went to lecture at the University of Berlin. Now, there were age requirements to be able to be a professor and whatnot, and Bonhoeffer ended up getting 2 degrees, and so we can read both of his theses online. Act in Being and Sacred Community, in essence, highfalutin stuff. But that's not where he stayed. He allowed his experiences with real-life people to affect him. And before you think this is a scene shot with his fiancée, nope, that's not the truth, because his fiance in the movie, although that's not where I'm talking about now, you got to look at the super chat goal for that. This fiance is only shown briefly, never told that she's going to become the fiance. This is actually his twin sister. Bonhoeffer was a twin, and yes, they love to smoke. Those German Lutherans love to smoke. That's a stereotype of them, and in the movie definitely embraced that stereotype of the smoking German Lutherans. And he also had an older brother who did go off and fight in the Great War, which came to be known as World War I. His death was very tragic. There's a saying that Bonhoeffer's father, when he got the news about the older brother dying, that he went into the room and never came out again, meaning that when he came out, he was never the same person. He didn't die in there, literally. But the father took the news rather hard. His father himself was in charge of, a division of Berlin. They're having to do with brain surgery. He's a neurologist, and so that's why they were in Berlin. And his mother was what would be considered old money. The father was new money, and the mother actually had a sort of religious prestige within her family. But the family was sort of nominally religious, And you have Bonhoeffer starting to take it a lot more serious than everybody else, and wasn't considered the most prestigious job profession to be a theologian. Sam says, I smoke cigarettes, need to quit. My job in Texas is helping me with that, thank God. Hey, Sam, either way, I want you to know we love you here. And we got a lot of brothers and sisters that struggle with the same thing. And yeah, it's not perfect, but you know what? There's a lot worse things that you could be doing. And even though I'm definitely not a fan of the smell, I definitely don't want you to feel too beat up about that, you know. But nonetheless, if you feel convicted to go towards stopping, that's very good, and I do hope that, so we can keep you around longer. Shout out to my man, Truth Defenders. How you doing, brother? And so that's where his older brother is going off. Now, let's look at Bonhoeffer's life, which was quite significant, and he did a lot in a short amount of time. And we're going to look at the details of this later, but one interesting thing that happens is the Nazis want to Nazify German society in the buildup and in the prime time of World War II. And so they want to take hold of every institution to reshape it in their image. So society is completely Nazified all the way through. That's going to include the churches. That's going to include the places of education. And see, in Germany, this is more problematic than you might imagine because, see, you have these state-run churches. And with these state-run churches, guess who pays the minister's salary and the seminary professor's salary? Well, actually, it's the government because they collect taxes from the people and they redistribute them back. And so if you're out of sorts with the government, you're losing a job as a pastor or a professor of a seminary. Well, eventually, Bonhoeffer went to a place called Finkenwald, and he actually teaches pastors at an underground seminary. And the government had banned him from teaching openly. And so eventually the seminary was discovered, it was closed. And now this next line, some of this I've copied and pasted from other places, other parts I've reworked and stuff. So this is something I probably, the further I got into this, I would have reworked this where it says, went from pacifist to spy. It's a little facile to strictly call Bonhoeffer a pacifist. He definitely prioritized, peace over war and reconciliation over aggression. It was not into militarism or triumphalism or anything like that. No doubt about that. But it's a little facile just to call him pacifist or to spy. But nonetheless, it's generally true. Now, some people don't like that because it's a little too facile, but it's not like there's no truth to it. Shout out to D New and everybody else coming in. What about the spy part? Well, eventually you're going to see Bonhoeffer sign up with the German Secret Service, but he's going to act as a double agent. This is really his only move to make at this time. And what he did was he would travel to these different church conferences all over Europe, and he was supposed to be collecting information about the places he visited, but instead what he did was he would in some cases help Jewish people escape, and in other cases he would become sort of a underground news network. He was kind of part of this underground news network here, and he was telling people in other places what was going on. And he was considered a trusted source, and Nazi propaganda had really closed off a lot of the outside world to what was really happening. And so they couldn't trust what was coming out of Germany proper. And so Bonhoeffer was part of a network of getting the truth out about what was really happening. He was a pastor. He was a nonviolent resistor. That was his primary thing. He was a children's Sunday school teacher at one point. Some people call him pacifist. Again, that's a little facile. But crazily enough, he became part of a plot to assassinate Hitler. And when Fabian von Schlabendorf was trying to assassinate Hitler using a suicide bomb, Bonhoeffer apparently was praying for his success. Now, the level of his involvement with the plot to assassinate Hitler is a little unclear, and it's probably exaggerated in a lot of retellings of the story because it's fantastical, as well as elements of him helping Jews escape. For example, Operation 7. There's all kinds of different things about that. If you watch the movie, he's driving the truck up to the border. He didn't do that. What he did do, most likely, it seems, is write letters on people's behalf and sort of set connections. But obviously you see that it's more exciting to have him in the movie driving up to the border. Things like that. But you had Fabian von Schleierendorf, and he didn't want the German explosives because apparently they would hiss before they would detonate. So they got explosives, I believe, from England. And what happened was he was with the resistance, but he was in a Nazi uniform. He was thought to be one of their guys. Well, Hitler was supposed to do this tour of this facility and armory, and this explosive needed a certain amount of time before it would explode. Before it would explode. But what happens is the man with the tiny mustache, he cut his tour short. And since he had cut his tour short, what happened? Well, there wasn't enough time for the explosive to go off. And so it was one of the many unsuccessful plots against his life. But he was involved with resistance efforts. And this was discovered, and they show in the movie it has to do with some of the money that they received. And so April afternoon, 1943, two men arrived in a black Mercedes, put him in their car, and drove him to Tegel prison. Spent 2 years there, and he wrote to people, and so we've got his letters. And his letters, they got different things in them. He's clearly reflecting, and you'll find these random sections in his letters where he does things like doubts the historicity of certain elements of the New Testament, and on and on and on. So people bring that out, and we're not going to deny there's elements of his theology that are compromised or confusing. But when we look at Bonhoeffer, I think the important thing to look at is his life lived. So his theology may not have always helped him to pass an American evangelical theological test. You see what I'm saying? And I say that partially tongue-in-cheek because I am one, and I understand that. And you also... Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and have to time you out. Seven Samurai, we don't mind you expressing your opinion, but you're going too far. Let's delete that last comment. I don't know what you're on, but also, can you stick to the subject of what we're talking about? Because we are not talking about what you're talking about, and I don't want to have to say this again to you. So, mods, please take care of that ASAP. So, when we look here at Bonhoeffer, we see someone who is resisting against Hitler and the Nazis, and he paid the price for it. And so when we look at him, we're looking at a courageous, brave life, and that's the important thing. And one of the areas that he showed his bravery and courage is in the area of combating Jew hatred. What happened in paragraph 4 of the Nazi manifesto? It says, no Jew may be part of the nation. And you see this show up with violence, persecution, exclusion from government. And this meant civil service, which meant any kind of church thing or university posts. Now, the thing is, why did I, even though I'm talking about Bonhoeffer, why did I make this a little controversial, even more than it really was, with go ahead and talking about, Christian nationalists not liking this guy? Well, because there are a certain strand of Christian nationalists who also do not want Jews to be part of society. They don't want any others other than their American heritage people to be part of a so-called Christian nation. You can find these quotes. And so they would actually agree, some of them, with paragraph 4 of this manifesto. Imagine that. There was something called the Deutsche Christian Movement, and essentially it was to Nazify the church with an Aryan Christ and a Jew-free ecclesia. So they started pushing things like, you can't have any pastors who are of Jewish descent. And what's Jewish descent? It's if 3 of your 4 grandparents are Jewish or are understood to be Jewish. So you'd have to prove your lineage to show you were an Aryan and things like that. And Hitler backed off the churches at one point. Now, he got back on them at another point. But some of the churches were so willing to go along with this program, they've been caught up in the zeitgeist of the age, that they're like, okay, don't worry, we know you stopped pushing, but we're going to do it anyway. And so there's a lot of problems and confusion there. And this thing that I'm talking about was called the Aryan Clause in 1933, which would say Jews can't act as pastors. And you had compromise there. For example, some pastors saying, well, look, this is wrong, but just in the spirit of Christian fellowship, or to avoid problems, or to aid the weaker brother, Jews do not seek any leadership within the church. Stuff like that. But there were people who protested, such as Martin Niemöller and the Confessing Church. they held to the historical theological confession. So it's not just a story of Bonhoeffer, it's a story of Martin Niemöller, it's a story of the confessing church. And the what is it called? The emergency pastors, I think was the name. I'm trying to remember the name of one of the other groups they had. Now, by the end, most of these groups had been effectively shut down by the government, unfortunately. And there was an area. There were many areas in which the confessing church even itself did compromise. So yes, they're better than what was going on, but they're not perfect heroes. And really, there's no such thing as that. And that goes for Bonhoeffer himself as well. You have the 1933 Bethel Confession, and this is where you had the confessing church come out and stand against this anti-Semitism the church itself was embracing, sadly enough. And it said this, amongst other things: the community of those who belong to the church is not determined by blood, and therefore not by race, but by the Holy Spirit and baptism. Isn't that a great quote? Amen. Yes, it is. Read that 3 times and thank God, and let's give it applause. Amen. And you know what else? I also need to give my main man Yandel some applause or some noise, because he gave this first and only super chat of the day. It's a substantial one, though, so very helpful. Thank you, brother, a.k.a. Alan Torres. If you're in Nevada, you know to go to Torres to deal with all of your AC problems. Or I think they do heat, too, because I know it's getting a little cold around this time. So God has blessed his business, and we pray that God continues to bless his business for real, because we see that you help others, and looks like you've even helped me twice. So let me, wow, thank you, my friend, and let me give you a little bit more. That's you. Shout out. Keep it up, because apologetics needs guys like you and gals like you to survive and thrive in 2024. Look at the Barmen Declaration. This is another one. This is from 1934, and this is something else that I thought was good. Now, one of them Bonhoeffer had a hand in. The other one he didn't. Okay, Yandel says, "Yep, I'm busy with heat calls. It's brick out here." Well, brick is slang for something. I don't even know what brick is. What's brick? Somebody help me. I'm out of the loop. My bad, bro. Tell me what brick is. Help me out, man. But here's what the Barmen Declaration said, 1934. "We repudiate the false teaching that the church can and must recognize yet other happenings and powers, personalities, and truth as divine revelation along this one word of God." And so you had these theological declarations, some of which were published in newspapers, where you had the confessing church not going along with the program. Now, by the end, the man and his system had basically broken down all this resistance over time, but it's good to see them standing up as long as they could in the society and having to ask real questions about what the role of the church is in relationship to the state. Okay, yeah, I thought it was Yandel. I just wasn't sure. I'm reading the live chat. Yes, if you're rewatching this, I do interact. These are my people. So again, thank you. And shout out to Gerard Perry, all the way out there in Brooklyn, New York. And Nate, you're right, and that's unfortunate. Okay. So taking a look at Dietrich Bonhoeffer, taking a look at what he stood for and accomplished, taking a look at some of his quotes, and taking a look at some of the people he surrounded himself with, we can see that he stood in stark contrast to some of the German pastors of his day. Now, the man pictured from the movie is not the one who said this. I just grabbed a still of a German pastor from the situation. And these are real quotes from German pastors, though, during this time. Listen to this. One's anonymous. The other one's by Hermann Grunner. The Hermann Grunner one we'll read first. Here's what it says. "The time is fulfilled for the German people of Hitler. It is because of Hitler that Christ, God the Helper and Redeemer, has become effective among us. Hitler is the way of the Spirit and the will of God for the German people to enter the Church of Christ." Wow. Wow. And this one's shorter, and so I just look at this and I'm like, whoa. Christ has come to us through Adolf Hitler. A German pastor actually said that. And so most of the church and the Christians that call themselves Christians either said nothing when evil was happening all around them, and it's true, they didn't know everything. You know, the full-blown thing that we see is not what was there in the beginning. It was a slow progression, and that's the way to get people into this stuff. And over time, it became more and more clear what was really happening, although you could have understood it if you read Mein Kampf and saw that they were just enacting what his, his goals were. Okay, we're going to time out Seven Samurai. This is your last chance, man. Okay? Last chance. Stay on topic. We don't mind you disagreeing. It's what you're saying. It's out of pocket and it's off topic. Last chance, okay? So you could see here how Bonhoeffer standing in stark contrast. And even amongst the confessing church, he was viewed as a young radical. Horrible, 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 horrible. Faith Refined by Fire talks about Candace Owens talking about OBJ helping Jews in World War II. How did Lyndon Baines Johnson help Jews in World War II? I don't know much about that. I'd never heard about that, but unless you're talking about someone else. And she was stressing how it was illegal and he could have been removed from Congress for it. Oh, was he a congressman at that time? Is that what you're saying? I was wondering what I was watching. Craziness. Yeah, I'm 100% done with her. 100% done with her, and I think every conservative should be absolutely done with her. 100%. You guys really should be done with her 100%. Shout out to JM for this third super chat of today. Thank you very, very much. Continuing on here. Bonhoeffer had a great quote for this type of inactivity that he so despised, that he saw around him. And he said, "We have become silent witnesses of evil deeds. We've become cunning and learned in the arts of obfuscation and equivocation." I always have trouble pronouncing that word. But notice how he's calling out the church that he saw. He said, when he says we, he's talking about the church here. He's not just talking about general German society. He is talking about the church. And there's the actor who played him in the movie, all right? And the actor is a German actor, and he did a fine job. He did an excellent job, and it was a very fascinating portrayal in many, many ways. Now, during the midst of all this, at one point Bonhoeffer went to America as a guest lecturer, but within months he wrote back to Reinhold Niebuhr. So he had a that's another big ethicist name. He had a lot of big names in his life who were important, known later on and even in their time. And he said, "I have made a mistake in coming to America. I must live through this difficult period in our national history with the Christian people of Germany. I will have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share the trials of this time with my people." Now, what's interesting about this is what you have here is you have people realizing that Bonhoeffer basically was walking around with a target on his chest. And so his friends and family wanted him to get out. And so what happened is they enabled him to become a guest lecturer in America. Obviously, he would be safe there, right? And there he is in America, but they want him to stay. His people love him, but he almost immediately was like, "No, I'm going to go back." He knows that going back is going to mean trouble, to put it mildly. But he feels like he has to suffer with the German Christians of his nation in order to participate in the reconstruction of the church. Because he realizes that after this is all over, the German church is going to be in a much different place because of what happened. And he believes that there's going to be a reconstruction, in essence, of what is going on with Christianity in Germany. And he feels like he won't have a proper place to do that unless he's there with his people during this time. And so he writes this, and he does come back, and he does get arrested. And so it's very, very fascinating to see him wrestling with this and not taking the safe route. But yet he was willing to go directly against the failed Austrian painter himself. Now, the failed Austrian painter demanded that church leaders would sign loyalty oaths and accept his policies. He literally would make them sign and declare that they were loyal to him. So Bonhoeffer forms and joins this confessing church in 1934. Headed that seminary I talked about earlier that trained pastors for the confessing church. And I was very small, very small. And it's said that one time when a new person was coming there, like, "Well, who's in charge?" And pointed down to a group of guys playing soccer. And he's like, "Right there." And the new person was like, "You mean the guy," and I'm paraphrasing, "the guy kicking everyone's butt in soccer?" Apparently, Bonhoeffer was somewhat of an athlete as well. Now, it was different types of sports, specifically, I guess, tennis tennis and soccer. But he was, he wasn't above, even though he was sort of had an elite background. In a lot of ways, he learned how to get it in and be down with everybody else. Now, in the movie, they show when they shut down the underground seminary that it gets burnt. Now, yes, they do shut down the seminary, but they don't burn it. So there's where you see, okay, it makes it more extreme to have it be burnt, right? But it's not like the whole thing's a lie, right? There was an underground seminary, and it really did get shut down, but the Nazis didn't burn the building. But it's more extreme. So, I understand these are artistic choices, so you just need to be aware of that kind of stuff when you go in there. But he headed that seminary, even though he didn't feel qualified. They shut it down in 1937, and Bonhoeffer still went around and made these secret visits for 2 years to train seminarians, going here, going there. And he joined something that was understood to be the German military intelligence, but that's where he was a double agent because he reported military secrets and what was going on more basic to the Brits. But after this came to light that he was involved with a plot to assassinate Hitler, he was arrested by the Gestapo. And so, just a lot going on in his life. Now, what I want to do is show part of a trailer to the movie. I feel like this is a good time right now. We got people coming in, and I want to break it up a little bit here. You're going to need to give me just a second to set this up, but are you guys cool with that? Let me talk to you for a second here. Have you guys seen this movie, or what do you know about Dietrich Bonhoeffer? I would love to hear. I see I've got a couple comments here. Or what questions do you have about Dietrich Bonhoeffer? And we're going to try to get those. So can you guys let me know if you have thoughts on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you know something about him, if you have specific questions or anything like that. I would love to see what you guys have to say and what you guys already know. So let's go ahead and play this trailer real quick here. Okay, and let's watch it together, and we'll be right back. And we're gonna look.
Hitler has captured the nation's imagination, Dietrich.
Bravery is a rare commodity. You will go to England as our spy.
What good is the church if it doesn't speak for the victims of the state?
The church's job is to kindle peace, peacefully.
Oh, you mean silently?
I need you to understand that your life will not be the same after I speak these words. We have devised a plot to assassinate the Führer. Guide our hands. Guide our trembling hands.
God sent Germany a true savior!
Our silence in the face of evil is itself evil.
Words aren't words anymore, Dietrich. They're nooses, bullets. This is a trigger that cannot be unpulled.
Will God forgive us if we do this? Will He forgive us if we don't?
That picture is funny. Maybe we'll talk about him again one day. Well, welcome back, or if you're just now coming in to Street Apologist Live, I'm your host, Vocab Malone. This is Urban Apologetics Show, and right now we're covering Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I'm going to give you 6 reasons why Christian nationalists hate Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And I'm sharing clips from a movie that is in theaters right now, and I think that you guys will appreciate it if you watch it. So let's see what some of you in the live chat are saying, and I would love to see what you guys have to offer. So we've got Cynthia Thomas says, Bonhoeffer had a very bright light of the Lord's truth, that I see why the Christian nationalists hate him, because he cried loud and spared not, and his time and what he did is relevant today. Exactly right, Cynthia. You're exactly right. And see, here's the thing. Why do I say Christian nationalists, hate him? Well, because when this movie was coming out on X, I kept on seeing all these posts where people were saying, your timeline is about to get flooded with Bonhoeffer hagiography. Let me show you how evil his theology really was. And you have the Stone Choir guy saying, he's definitely in hell. He's definitely in hell. He was an enemy of the faith, an enemy of the cross. You have that. But I suspect they've got more going on than what is on the surface with their dislike of Bonhoeffer. And after I talk about his life, I'm going to tell you what those reasons are. Faith Refined by Fire says, I have Bonhoeffer's book, Ethics. I haven't read it yet. Maybe it should be my next book. Well, let me say something about that, because we want to be honest here. Okay, so the people who say that Bonhoeffer had compromises in his theology, well, they're not wrong. They're not just nitpicking, although some do overfocus on that as a way to discount his legacy, and that's a problem for me. It should be a problem for all of us, I think. Take the person's total life, total package. Ethics, some people have said, shows elements or signs of situational ethics. Now, I am not 100% clear if that's true or not. I would say if you're going to read a Bonhoeffer book, the best one to read, and it's not a perfect book either. Listen, none of these are the Bible, is The Cost of Discipleship or Life Together. Those are the two that have a devotional element, and even if you find things you disagree with, which I think you will if you're a thinking Christian, you'll see the importance of community in his writings. And so even though in some ways we might say, Bonhoeffer's a little compromised over here, there's other ways in which I think we can affirm that he had a high ecclesiology, higher than a lot of liberals proper of his day. And so that's a book to read. If you want to read an evangelical take on Bonhoeffer, then it probably would be Eric Metaxas. A lot of people have mentioned him in the live chat. And Gerard Perry, for example, said, hey, I still have to read the Eric Metaxas book. That book is controversial, as almost everything is about him. Sam says, I don't watch movies, I read. The only thing I watch are videos online. Well, that's your choice. That's okay. The Eric Metaxas book is lauded. Not that it's perfect either, but people seem to like it. And I have not read it, but I do know that a lot of people enjoyed it. I think there's a good interview with Eric Metaxas and John Piper that I'd recommend people to check out as well. So I'm getting back into my presentation on Bonhoeffer, but right now I'm just looking at what the live chat has to say. Shout out to Minister Meach. Shout out to Lifting My Cross. And Sam says they put out the Bonhoeffer movie at this time and to insinuate Trump is potentially the new Hitler. I'm going to go ahead and have to disagree with you there, Sam. In fact, liberal critics of the movie have said it's exactly the opposite. And it's funny how his legacy and media about him can be so interpreted. Remember, Sam, this movie goes into production years before it gets released, right? That's important to understand. A Bonhoeffer movie of this caliber had been in the works for a long time. There's a couple sort of made-for-TV movie type vibe. The vibe of the movies I'm saying is a made-for-TV movie that are on YouTube that you can watch. Agent of Grace is 20-some years old. It's one. And they got some decent stuff in them. They're free. But this is sort of more of an epic tale. It's told with much higher production value. So it depends what you're after. And I do like the drama because that's part of why I watch movies. It's like, and I appreciate that. If you want to watch a documentary, which I see some people said they have, that could be a good way to go. And Faith Refined by Fire says she's seen some. There's a lot of good documentaries about him out there. And so, it's funny, even in the live chat, all these different comments that people have and questions. Nate wants to know, was Bonhoeffer an Orthodox Christian? Not entirely. No, not really. In some ways he was. He seemed to affirm important confessions. But in other ways, in regards to his questioning of the Old Testament, in regards to his questioning of things that are historical and questioning their historicity, and things along those lines, not as much. Now, his theology evolved and changed over time, and he also could write things that seemed contradictory. And so I'm not saying he's not a Christian, but you asked Orthodox Christian. And if we're defining Orthodox essentially as synonymous somewhat as classical and it's somewhat synonymous with evangelical, the answer is no. But I'm not saying that it means he wasn't a Christian. I do not agree with people that say that. And Faith Refined by Sarah says, I know he liked American gospel music. That's exactly right. He liked black music in general. I heard he was a universalist. There's some things he said which could be interpreted that way. But I don't know if I would call him a universalist proper. And again, that's weird. I don't know if he thought that. Faith Refined by Fire. I don't know if he thought that. But remember, he also was part of a plot. He was praying for the success of a plot to get rid of the man. Gerard Perry says, I bought a bunch of his books. Barnes & Noble haven't read them yet. Well, I know how you feel, my friend. Sam, your comments are not getting caught up. Oh, YBIC did a review of this movie? Oh, I'd like to see it. Sam says, I've never heard of Angel Studios. It's a sort of religious, faith-friendly joint. JM, not that I remember. I do not remember it touching on the Valkyrie plot. That's a movie with Tom Cruise. I thought it was a great movie. But I think that Valkyrie plot is what really drew people to have more scrutiny about Bonhoeffer and the people involved with other plots as well. Okay. I'm just... Yes, Charlie, it is true. I am a Calvatard to boot. That's exactly right. I certainly am. I'm a total Calvatard. Now, how you doing? Gerard, I'm putting your comment up there. D New, I agree with the short leash. That's how we're going to need to do it today, 100%. I haven't seen it. Oh, my goodness. You know, I'm going to say he probably would not be as revered because there's a big sort of epic finish to going out, being hung by Hitler. And so I think his martyrdom, some people don't define it as such, drew more attention to his life. So I think he would be less known like Martin Niemöller. That's an interesting point, by the way, my friend. Yes, they do all speak English with American accents. Now, a lot of the actors are German, and I don't want English subtitles the whole time. However, one of my criticisms of the movie is that it was a little too easy on English-speaking audiences. I don't remember hearing hardly any German phrases. Not much distinctly German. There are lots of times where they really should have had German, specifically a time when he gets a Bible and the Bible that he's looking at is in English. I was just like, just let him look at a German Bible, please. So there was things like that I felt like, okay, you can make us work a little harder. That was one thing I didn't like. It took me out of the movie a few times. Okay, back to the presentation. These are great questions. We are discussing Dietrich Bonhoeffer tonight, and I'm going to show you 6 reasons why Bonhoeffer is disliked by Christian nationalists. One powerful, beautiful thing about Bonhoeffer is that 2 days after Hitler became chancellor in 1933, by the way, totally legal, Bonhoeffer gave a radio address criticizing his authoritarian approach to leadership and his anti-Semitism. And he talked about how we need to really understand what a Führer is and watch out that our leaders don't become misleaders. I haven't heard that phrase before, but in my studying of Bonhoeffer, I started hearing this phrase about misleaders. And I like that phrase. That's a very fascinating use of a phrase to describe leaders who are leading us astray. Interestingly enough, the Bonhoeffer radio address, his microphone gets cut off as he's culminating to his finish. We never knew why. We'll never know for sure why his mic was cut off and the rest of the address was not able to be heard. Obviously, you might think of some SS hijinks or something like that, but we don't know for sure. But his microphone was cut off and he could not 100% finish. Now, speaking of finish, on April 9th, 1945, 1 month before Germany surrendered and 3 weeks before Hitler committed suicide, he was hanged with 6 other resistors. Now, in the movie, he's hanged sort of on a proper gallows with a rope. We do not know if that's true. There's some evidence that he may have been struggling for 2 hours. Now, it gets kind of complicated why some scholars think that, and he may have even been hung with meat hooks using fishing wire. But the movie doesn't show all that. It does show it in sort of a kind of quick way. I could see people accusing it of being hagiography at that point. But what's interesting is there was a camp doctor there who witnessed Bonhoeffer's hanging. Now, everything about Bonhoeffer is controversial. Even this camp doctor who describes Bonhoeffer, I'm going to read the quote to you here in a second. During his death, this has been called into question because I think it's from 10 years later, and people were saying, well, maybe the camp doctor wanted to show that it wasn't so bad after all what was happening because he had a role in it, and maybe he was trying to show it wasn't so bad. And so he said this about Bonhoeffer, but this could be his own version of hagiography about Bonhoeffer in order to make himself look better. I don't know, but I'm going to read you what he said. The prisoners were taken from their cells, and the verdicts of court-martial read out to them. Through the half-open door in one room of the huts, I saw Pastor Bonhoeffer, before taking off his prison garb, kneeling on the floor, praying fervently to his God. I was most deeply moved by the way this lovable man prayed, so devout and so certain that God heard his prayer. At the place of execution, he again said a prayer and then climbed the steps to the gallows, brave and composed. His death ensued in a few seconds. In the almost 50 years that I have worked as a doctor, I have hardly ever seen a man die so entirely submissive to the will of God. So that's what the camp doctor said. And yes, you're exactly right. Faith for fire, yeah. Do a video. Oh, I didn't know about that. I don't know if send me more information, JM, and maybe I will. Yeah, wrong movie there, Nate. But there's some truth to what you're saying, actually. Why are we talking about this, though? Let's not talk about this, okay? Fascinating quote, and it said that he was kind to the other prisoners. This was something that was known among eyewitnesses, and they do show that in the movie. And also that he had several chances to escape, and he did not take them because he was worried about how it would have negative repercussions for his family. Again, fascinating, isn't it? Now, Bonhoeffer was prolific and had a prodigious output during and after his life, mainly by his friends and scholars who collected things. And so you've got 1930, a theological study of the sociology of the church. Act and Being, 1931. These are his dissertations. You've got Creation and Fall, a theological interpretation of Genesis 1 through 3. I have that on Logos. I have not read it. I do not think us young earth creationists would like a lot of what he says there. I'm just saying. But it's from a class that he taught. The Cost of Discipleship, probably his most famous book. It's actually just called Discipleship in German, but they add The Cost of Discipleship, which I think is probably makes more sense, to be honest. Life Together, the other well-known one. Ethics, which some of you have. Letters and Papers from Prison. This is after his death. And there's where he gets some theologically questionable statements going. Now, these other ones I know less about, but Christ the Sinner is also from class notes, I do believe. And you see that he was a busy man, 39 years old, you know. Fascinating. Okay. So Bonhoeffer also taught Sunday school, and he taught rough kids in Berlin, and he even taught kids in Harlem. That's in Berlin, not Harlem. One of his probably most famous quotes, though, is something that I like very much, and I think this is a good way to really simplify and reduce down is the size of his legacy. Is this understanding, how he had an understanding of discipleship that showed how radical it was. And look what he said here. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Ooh, that's powerful. That's beautiful. Shout out to Warrior Woman for the super chat. Thank you very much, Warrior Woman. We've got 4 of 5, only one more to go before we hit our 5, and then I'll do a review of the movie here on the channel right during this live stream. Theology, positives. And I did take this from someone else who has since went off the rails, some of these positives, but nonetheless, I do agree with some of the statement there. You've got the fact that he pushed loyalty to Christ above all. No question about that. And I like that about his legacy, the positive of his theology. He pushed loyalty to Christ above all. The state, you know, above blood and soil, as the Christian nationalists like to say then and now. He pushed the importance of community, the centrality of the church. I like his ecclesiology in that area, and I think that's important. He also pushed the notion of don't despair. You know, when you see cultural decline around you, don't despair. There was an optimism yet a realism in him, and I appreciate that. He spoke of being a witness, living for Christ in a culture, being a light in a dark culture. And these are important things. No matter about the rest of his theology, we can pull these out and say, this is good. And you know what? He did it. Now, was he perfect? No. But did he do it? Yes. And resistance, paying the price to say no to evil. You might be drawing a target on your back, but you need to resist evil and count that cost and be willing to pay it. And also, there's a lot of good in his 2 books that are really well known, mostly among evangelicals, Cost of Discipleship and Life Together. And these are about Christian community based upon his teaching and his time at the underground seminary, no doubt about that. Now, what about negatives? Now, these are criticisms. I don't know 100% if these are all true, but some of them I do know are true. He did deny literal creation, it seems. He did deny the inerrancy of Scripture, it seems. He downplayed personal conversion, although that's a criticism of him. However, the thing is that you see there's times where I believe Bonhoeffer talks about personal conversion, where you're like, oh, I was just reading today a book that I find very helpful called Bonhoeffer for Armchair Theologians. It's actually my favorite Bonhoeffer book. I guess it shows how simple of a man I am, but I love this little book. It's out of all the books I've looked at Bonhoeffer, my favorite one is Bonhoeffer for Armchair Theologians. And in there, he talks about what really sounds like a personal conversion to me. He talks about before he knew religion, but his motives were wrong, and he was different after this experience. And I'm like, oh. But then other times you see him kind of making fun of people who make too much of their personal conversion, not really making fun of them, but like downplaying it. So you get the contradictory things there in Bonhoeffer. Some people say the cost of discipleship promotes a works-based salvation. Now, he does criticize cheap grace, and that's something that can be misinterpreted, but I think his point is good when he goes after cheap grace. He talked about looking to the future for something called religionist Christianity. Now, what exactly did he mean by that? There's some problems there, and it's like, wait a minute, I thought you had a high ecclesiology, you know, but now are you going to say that doctrine doesn't matter, just obedience? I find that nonsensical, but I'm not 100% sure that's what he's saying. And that's the thing is, Bonhoeffer can be twisted and turned by different crowds to be understood different ways. And we got to be careful with that, and that's a reality. Nonetheless, I don't hate on the movie, because some people feel like, well, I got to hate on the movie because of that. New Form of Light says, speaking of Nazis, what's going on with overt anti-Semitism among the Reform crowd? I got to tell you what, man, I don't know your personal perspective as far as Reform or Arminian, but the fact that what you're saying has some truth to it absolutely breaks my heart. What you're saying is true. I wish it was not true. I hate that it's true. I don't know the answer to that question, but I know I'm going to do everything I can to fight against it, and that's why I've titled this stream the way I have. So you are right, unfortunately, and I wish you were wrong, but you're not. Now, when we look at Bonhoeffer's legacy, I mentioned a number of times, almost everybody wants a piece of it. Almost everybody tries to put him in their image. The liberals do, the progressives do. You know, certain Lutherans do. Evangelicals certainly do. He does not fit neatly or nicely into any one category. People, especially the liberal crowd, dislikes Eric Metaxas's work. They dislike that. And you see that people like Stephen Nichols have been accused of sort of baptizing Bonhoeffer in evangelicalism. There's some truth to that, but the thing is, Bonhoeffer does have contradictory statements. And so sometimes you can say, well, this is a great statement. And other times you say, this is not a great statement. But I believe a lot of people are basically over-interpreting Bonhoeffer sometimes. They act like they think they know what he means by X, Y, Z. But the fact is sometimes he says different things by X. We'll say X over here, Y over here, and Z over here. So I don't trust everyone who says, I'm the Bonhoeffer interpreter. I try to approach it with a little more, and maybe it's just my ignorance. Okay, I'll take that. A little more humility, like, okay, let's look at this. Do we really get this? Because it's interesting. A lot of people who trumpet Bonhoeffer, rightfully so, by the way, rightfully so, he deserves his flowers, are evangelicals, and they get rah-rah, and they see him as an example of resistance to the state. And I don't see how that's entirely wrong. And then the liberals push back, oh, well, you know. But it's interesting because the evangelical side usually knows the 2 books, and they know about his legacy. Most of the scholars of Bonhoeffer I've found, though, the more proper scholars, they're more on the progressive or liberal side. But what's interesting is I don't think they've got Bonhoeffer exactly right either, but they certainly know a lot about him. And so I found, for example, this amazing podcast. I think it's called Searching for Bonhoeffer or Finding Bonhoeffer. And I don't know the perspective of everyone in it. I can pick up a few people's perspective from it, but I can tell you that there's so much good information and it's so well done that it's probably the best thing you could listen to. Now, you're not going to agree with everything, but let's not be simple here, people. This Finding Bonhoeffer podcast, if that's what it's called. It's brand new. It just came out in the past two months. It's got really cool artwork. It's like an 8-part series. Is so informative. It's so helpful. It culturally locates Bonhoeffer in a way that I haven't seen many things do. Now, I don't expect the movie to do that, though, at that same level, because it's a 2-hour movie. The podcast is in-depth with scholars and interviews and just going in and plays original broadcasts and all kinds of things. So I think we can just say, hey, look, we can understand people who are sophisticated and complicated and nuanced, and there's shades there. Can we just do that? And you know what? I still think you should go to the theater and rah-rah this movie, though, because I'm okay with a little bit of rah-rah when someone should get rah-rah'd. And there's times where, regardless of his position, if you're an evangelical Christian, you should be excited about a lot of stuff that Bonhoeffer did. His actions are big. And so now I'm going to share 6 reasons Christian nationalists hate Bonhoeffer. But before we do that, can I play one more clip of the movie? Because I'm going to come back and I'm going to share these 6 reasons. And I think they'll make more sense to you if you've been with me throughout the show thus far. And I do think that you'll appreciate this. They're done a little bit tongue-in-cheek. They're done a little bit, kind of going after him a little bit. But I think it's good stuff. So let's get into this. All right. Are you ready now to hear 6 reasons why Christian nationalists hate Dietrich Bonhoeffer? 6 reasons why they do not like him. You've heard the biography I've given here on today's show, Street Apologist Live. You've seen clips from the movie. Now let's see about this. Reason number 1 why Christian nationalists hate Bonhoeffer is because he hoped to assassinate Adolf Hitler. And when you get into the underbelly of some of the nasty elements of the Christian nationalists, you'll find that a lot of them are fans of Tiny Mustache Man. And there was a recent kerfuffle where a number of them went after Winston Churchill, saying how he was the true villain of World War II. Was Churchill perfect? No. But to denigrate his legacy in order to make another guy not look as bad is problematic. This happened on a rather large podcast, and a lot of these so-called reform, so-called CN types picked it up. And a lot of them even have quoted things that he has said and have mocked people who are critical. They say, oh, you hold on to the post-war consensus. Post-war consensus. And so a lot of these guys don't like Bonhoeffer because they're mad that he tried to kill their boy. Reason number 2 out of 6 why a lot of Christian nationalists do not like Bonhoeffer is because he opposed the Nazis. He wasn't cool with them trying to put their swastikas up on churches. He wasn't cool with their Aryan paragraph. He wasn't cool with their declarations. He wasn't cool with them going to the church services and trying to control what pastors said. He wasn't cool with them saying you can't speak out on the plight of the Jews and he wasn't cool with any of that. He opposed Nazism. And so a lot of Christian nationalists, they kind of like elements of Nazism. They like the blood and soil talk. They like the kinfolk talk. They like the fatherland, motherland talk. They like that. But Bonhoeffer said, you know what? We got to hope that Germany loses this war because we want Christianity to triumph, not Germanism. Reason number 3. A lot of Christian nationalists don't like Bonhoeffer because he criticized German nationalism. Now, it's interesting. When you look at early Bonhoeffer statements, he said things himself that could be potentially interpreted as essentially nationalistic. Now, look, I'm patriotic, And I don't hate my country. So if you define nationalism, Christian nationalism, a certain way, then I would qualify. And so those liberals who qualify, who have it go in a certain way, for example, somebody who wants Christian influence on the government and say you're a Christian nationalist, okay. I'm talking about what it's morphed into, sort of the Christendom 2.0 types. Bonhoeffer criticized their goals and said, look, we need the gospel to triumph over this. He wasn't down with the militarism and the parading around of acts of aggression and taking. He wasn't cool with any of that. And a lot of Christian nationalists are. And so they don't like Bonhoeffer. So they'll point out some of his flawed theological statements. Reason number 4 why Christian nationalists hate Bonhoeffer is because he prioritized peace over war. I don't know if it's quite accurate to say he was a pacifist, but he definitely prioritized peace over war. And they don't like that. They like the tales of people chopping up people and all that. Now, look, we've got to laud the brave men and women who defend freedoms. But that's the thing. Is it needless aggressive military action that we're lauding, or are we trumpeting positive examples of people who are heroes because they're defending the vulnerable, ultimately adhering to just war theory, you know? And that's why a lot of these Christian nationalists are acting like the Crusades were such a great thing, because they don't prioritize peace over war. Now, look, I'm not a pacifist, okay? I want a strong military to deter the wicked, but I want to prioritize peace over war. That doesn't mean appeasement, but it does mean we put first things first. Reason number 5 why Dietrich Bonhoeffer is hated by Christian nationalists is because he spent time learning from black Christians. And all you got to do is go on X and find some of the most ugly statements about black Christians and black people you can among so-called Christian nationalists or their buddies who hype them up. It's disgusting, the stuff they say. I don't want to repeat it. I hate even reading it when I see it. But Bonhoeffer spent time in Harlem. Bonhoeffer learned from someone who was not an evangelical, Adam Clayton Powell. Bonhoeffer taught black Sunday school children. He visited parishioners in their homes there in Harlem, New York. Bonhoeffer was changed so positively by his experience with Abyssinia Baptist Church. Bonhoeffer learned from people the world over who in their situation were greatly persecuted. It taught him to properly identify in a gospel way with the marginalized. Bonhoeffer was impressed at the beauty and the power of the music and the full-throated worship to God and praise and joy and jubilation in the midst of trials when they're being mistreated. And he hated the way they were mistreated. He himself experienced some mistreatment because he had a friend named Frank. It was from Alabama. And Frank, this is from the Bonhoeffer for me, showed Bonhoeffer the nightlife of Harlem. So he learned a lot about that. And he appreciated it. And he went back home and he played jazz records for his seminarians. And I got to tell you what. Christian nationalists don't like that at all. But you know the main reason why Christian nationalists hate Bonhoeffer, the 6th and final reason? Because he spoke out against and worked against anti-Semitism. He defended Jewish people. Now, there's some people who still don't like Bonhoeffer and say, well, yeah, but a lot of the people he helped were Jewish Christians. There's some truth to that, but it doesn't seem like that's all he was interested in doing, because he spoke out against what was going on in multiple ways, and he was not okay with the anti-Semitism that was becoming commonplace amongst the Germans. He spoke out against it. He hated it. He knew it was destructive to the church, and I think that's one of the main reasons, because my goodness, these Christian nationalists, some of them running around, are so anti-Semitic. My goodness. And so I love to see the hate on Bonhoeffer when it's by a group that should be hating him, because they got their theology and their priorities and their reasons all wrong. So they're going to dislike him. And sometimes you can tell you're doing the right thing by those who dislike you. Now, I'd rather see these Christian nationalists drop their nonsense, and I pray that it's a fad for a lot of them, and then realize that Bonhoeffer is a courageous hero. They look at him as weak, and he's not a real man and all this stuff, you know. But you know what? He was braver and showed more courage than 99% of the people you're ever going to meet in your life. And he did so against a massive system, and he did so in the face of danger, and he did not run from or away. He ran to the danger. for the behest of others to become a voice for the voiceless. But we can see that there are 6 reasons why these Christian nationalists hate Bonhoeffer. He hoped to assassinate their boy Hitler. He opposed Nazis and Nazism. He criticized German nationalism. He prioritized peace over war. He spent time learning from black Christians, and he spoke out and worked against anti-Semitism. And for that, we applaud Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Now, I'm going to show you some quotes here from Bonhoeffer. And they're not all good. Some of them are confusing. Some of them are good. That's Bonhoeffer in a nutshell for you. But we're just going to lay it out on the table, okay? Here's what he said in Cost of Discipleship. Cheap grace is preaching forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross. Grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate. So there's part of his criticism. I think that comes in the very beginning of the book, if I'm not mistaken. This is one of my favorite things I read that he wrote, this poem, Who Am I? And he wrote it in prison. And listen to what he said here. Who am I? This or the other? Am I one person today and tomorrow another? Am I both at once a hypocrite before others? And before myself a contemptible, woebegone weakling? Or is something within me still like a beaten army, fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I, they mock me, these lonely questions of mine? Whoever I am, thou knowest, O God, I am thine. Now that's the final stanza. I like that. Do you like that? I like that. Here's another Bonhoeffer quote. He says, to be Christian does not mean to be religious in a particular way. So that's like, wait, what are you saying there? To make something of oneself, a sinner, a penitent, or a saint, on the basis of some method or other, but to be a man, not a type of man, but the man that Christ creates in us. So it's like, I think I know what you're saying, but then I'm like, wait, what are you saying? A lot of Bonhoeffers like this. Again, remember, we're translating German, into English. And there's even a famous quote about order and disorder that a lot of people were saying, a lot of scholars are saying, you know what, that's probably been mistranslated, and they may be right about that. But here's what he says going on. It is not the religious act that makes a Christian, but participation in the sufferings of God in the secular life. Okay. So on one hand, he's against like fake, sanctimonious, useless religiosity. We should be able to get behind that. But then you're like, participation in the sufferings of God in the secular life. Okay, there's some liberation theology before liberation theology kind of coming through there. Some social gospel maybe. But then I can also see what he's saying, although I'm not a big fan of the sufferings of God. But it is true God identifies with the weak and the lesser and the vulnerable and the less powerful. So then I want to interpret this the most evangelical way possible. Basically, that's my sort of default mode with Bonhoeffer. Is that right or wrong, though? I don't know exactly. I'm still working through the details of it, so I'm trying to lay it on the table. But at the same time, I know I can clap for his bravery and courage and then lay some of this on the table. Now, I'm only showing quotes here, a little bit here or there, Shout out to Alton. Everyone subscribe to his channel. He says, I got to watch this from the beginning. I hope you do, or at least at 50 minutes in where it gets really good. JM says, Bonhoeffer took his persecution like a G. You're right, brother. He did. No joke. No joke about that. So there's a quote from Bonhoeffer. And here's one where you really see this more on full display. God lets himself be pushed out of the world onto the cross. He is weak and powerless in the world. Now, see, I can interpret that, I think, in a proper way if I run it through the filter of 1 Corinthians 1, where Paul talks about the weakness and the foolishness of God. But it means it in a certain way that I think we understand if we know the context of the letter. But see, how do I know for sure that's what he's running it through? I don't know, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like I can run that through and say, okay, I get what you're saying from that. So it depends what kind of how we grid this, you know what I mean? And that is precisely the only way in which he is with us and helps us. The Bible, that's in brackets, meaning that's what's implied, makes quite clear that Christ helps us, not by virtue of his omnipotence. And I'm like, well, partially that is by virtue of that. But it's like he's setting things against each other. Okay, let me follow you here. But by virtue of his weakness and suffering. Now, see, that's true, though, because it was his death on the cross that gives us victory and triumph. So he just states things starkly, but it's not like it's so wrong. it's like we got to follow the train or the trail before we cut them off too early in these quotes. And it's like that when you read Bonhoeffer. I'm not acting like I've read all of Bonhoeffer, by the way. I don't think I'll ever get around to reading Act and Being, okay? I honestly don't think I'm going to get around to reading Act and Being. Not that it's bad. I just don't think I'm going to have time to read his dissertation, Act and Being, okay? I'm just saying. But you can see that it's if you interpret this, you're like, okay, it was through the cross. That's the weakness in print, you know what I'm saying, in air quotes. So, okay, I follow you if that's what you're saying. The Bible directs man to God's powerlessness in suffering. Only the suffering God can help. Now, I got to figure out what he means by that, you know, because that's, I don't know, Dietrich. By the way, you know Dietrich means Theodore. In German, Dietrich's the equivalent of Theodore, so we could call him Teddy Bonhoeffer. Now, we have not got 5 super chats. We have 4. 2 from Yondell, 1 from Jay, and 1 from Warrior Woman. I told you guys I would do a review of the movie, which I've been sprinkling little hints in there, here and there, if we could get 5. So I'm going to trust you guys that during this time, I'm going to get 1 more. So please don't let me down. 1 more, and then I just feel like I should do it because I'm going to take it on faith that you're going to give me a little more. Okay, let's do this. If you're a Christian, you should see the Bonhoeffer movie. There's a lot of crap out in the theaters. There's not that much good that you really need to see. Is Bonhoeffer a movie? No. What's a perfect movie? Hardly anything. Is Bonhoeffer a really good movie? Yes. Has a lot of media been unfair in reviewing it? Yes. I've been looking at reviews. I just don't think they like the way that it's overtly religious, if you want to put it that way. I don't think they like Angel Studios. Yes, I'm guessing at people's motivations, but a lot of the reviews I read are a little too snarky for my taste. I think that this is a well-done movie. I think the people behind it got important elements about Bonhoeffer right. It's an exciting movie. It has an epic feel. It's well shot. Is it going to break any records for cinematography? You know what I mean? No, it's pretty straightforward, but it's also really well done, well presented, well acted, and it does tell a coherent story together, and it is something that I think every single one of you will appreciate. I know I have a diverse audience. I know there's all kinds of us in here together, but you're not going to go wrong with this. I took my teenage son. He's not that into this kind of stuff. Now, he's around me all the time, so he gets a load of it, and, you know, he adjusts. He humors me. He's growing and learning. He liked it. Today, during Sunday school, the teen class, he sort of gave his own mini reviews. Like, yeah, you should see it. It was good. I mean, there's like a few parts that were boring, but really it was really good. And I did like it, and I think you guys will like it. Something like that. It's a paraphrase of his review. That was a teenage review. If he likes it, I think you guys are going to like it. It's got epic stuff going on. This is an epic time in history. And it's going to show stuff going on. And it gives a good sense of building the pressure that was felt in the society, the pure intimidation. You get that in a good way. And you get it from a way that you don't often see. I think it's important. We can never let go the fact of how Jewish people were treated during that time. We don't get to see enough of other people, like how Afro-Germans were treated. That's true. But we rarely get to see the effect on the church. This movie shows that. This movie shows the pressure and intensity of the Nazi regime bearing down on the church. That's something I'm interested in. I think you're going to like that. And how can that not be a good lesson for us going forward? Now, is it going to be exactly the same? But are we going to see parallels? Not exactly the same, but I think we're going to see parallels. In some ways we have. Now, we need to balance this all out, but this movie helps. It puts things in a good perspective. You can look up the differences of fact and fiction in the movie if you'd like. Like I said, there's some things that didn't happen exactly, and other things that are exaggerated. You get the idea. I've talked about them throughout the show. But are you going to learn new names and new facts? And yes. It's got good music. It's just all around a quality product and a project. And I, for one, am glad that we're in a day where I can go to a theater, see a Christian movie, and it's not like the quality's taking a massive hit. I think I can sit down and say this is going to be a decent quality product. And with the case of Bonhoeffer, it certainly is. Are there things, if they consulted me, I would have done somewhat different? Sure, there's a few in there, yeah. But you know what? I also realized we're all different. Some of my least favorite parts of the movie were in the beginning with this family, because it's German boys running around playing and stuff. But I talked to somebody else, I don't know, maybe they are like kids more than me or something, I don't know, whatever. I was annoyed by the beginning parts. The other person was like, that was my favorite part of the movie, because they felt like showing the family in that way set the stage for a lot. To me, I was annoyed by it because I felt like it was too much setting the stage. It wasn't even that long, but I kind of wanted to get more into it. But okay, they set this. You see what I'm saying? So, am I saying that this is a movie you should watch? I am. I'm giving my recommendation. I can't imagine you going to see this and hating it. I cannot imagine that. And all it's going to do is drive you into more curiosity for who Bonhoeffer was, his legacy, and what was going on that time. So it gets the official Street Apologist Live thumbs up, and I want to thank you guys for coming through with the Super Chats as well. You guys came through with the Super Chats. And so let me take a look here. Shout out to Faith Refined by Fire. Shout out to Yondell for another one. And shout out to Leaf Divine Eternal. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And I'll put your comment on the screen here. Saw it with some buddies, great film. So another review. Makes one think about what I would do in his position and what I can do today. Exactly. It does have that effect on a Christian. So some of my favorite scenes, and I know I looked at it later, there's elements of exaggeration in it, but basically the essence of the vibe is right. Some of my favorite scenes are actually where they showed the Gestapo and SS officers in church, and different pastors in different situations speaking out or feeling the pressure of having to speak out against what Hitler was doing right there with these guys in the audience. And they did it in a dramatic effect kind of way, but the essence of it is true. The essence of it is true. And those are some of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. Now, that's probably the Christian church guy in me coming out, but you know what? I love those scenes because I feel the intensity and the pressure. I'm like, ooh, and I try to put myself in that position in 30s Germany and imagine what would this be like in this high church Lutheran context. And man, these guys, some of them came through. And so I agree with your point there. And, it's good. Now, why do I have fact versus fiction on here? Well, unless I'm misunderstanding, it looks like they put on Bonhoeffer in one of these movie posters a dynamite vest like I wear when I play Muhammad in the Boom Boom Room. Nothing like that ever happened. Now, the guy who went to try to go kill the chancellor, the one-time chancellor, he didn't have that exact setup, but he did have a little suicide joint on. So this is sort of artistic license. You know what I mean? And also, the real Bonhoeffer's on the right. He's not necessarily a dashing figure. You know what I mean? But the left and the guy on the left's got a little more Hollywood vibe. They do that kind of stuff. I feel like just know the genre you're watching. I think we can do that. So, do you guys have any other question or comments you want to throw out? Because I feel like we've got some great people up in here and great comments, and Yondell, and you guys came through. Cynthia says it seems like Bonhoeffer was deep. I agree. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And you guys did excellent and really killed it, and I appreciate everything you guys brought. Would you guys like to end with maybe one more little snippet from the movie? Because I feel like that could be a good place to end, playing one more little snippet. I hope that the Angel Studios doesn't ding me for this. Usually when you play trailers, they're like okay with it, I think, because they understand that it's like you're promoting their stuff, you know what I mean? And so I don't think that they have a problem. And so I hope that they don't have a problem here. So let's go ahead and play this and end. And I just want to say thank you guys so much. You guys were epic. You were awesome.
And lives.
Bonhoeffer took on the world. I mean, he was not afraid.
Filmed in Haarlem/Belgium were so filled with joy, and it almost felt like documentary footage because they burst into life when the music played, and it was beautiful. And it did the same for the actors, so there was this unity on set on those days that people didn't want to leave. It was as if we were out for a night at the club.
We have this proverb in German, the fish stinks from the head. So in this case, The head is beautiful and good, and the whole thing is nice.
Watching him on set, he's a real actor's director. It's fun listening in on the interactions he has with the
Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming.